204863. 204863. 2048.
All right, truth seekers. So I'm not really sure the best way to cover the topic of Ukraine, but I feel the most helpful thing that could be done is I'll show you some clips that convey the most about the context of Ukraine in as few words as possible. So just looking at this clip in the context of what Biden's son had done with Burisma, his overqualified position on the board for $80,000 a month, also in the context of the perfect phone call between Trump and President Zelensky with the resultant impeachment, all convey a strong implication of significant corruption in that country with United States involvement.
And they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Well, it just so happens that the general prosecutor was investigating an energy firm in which Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was heavily invested. Burisma Holdings is an energy corporation in Ukraine, and Hunter Biden, the son of the former vice president, has made a rather handsome profit from it, especially in the aftermath of the 2014 events in Ukraine, in which pro-EU forces took power.
Here's a post from the Storm Rider. I don't endorse everything in this statement, but I'll just read to you the beginning. Biden wants Ukraine burnt down. Style ops and destroy servers and all data points that link money laundering, billions in illegal oil gas deals distribution, stolen oil. Ukrainians were doing a large investment into Biden-Obama and have a lot of evidence. Closed indictments against Obama, Biden, and their administration. So recall here in this video, be wary of the neocon neolibs seeking to instigate W in Russia. I spoke about how Canadian special forces had deployed to Ukraine. So in this context, I'm a bit concerned that the World Economic Forum associated countries are sending forces to Ukraine in the midst of the chaos in order to protect records, destroying some, that could possibly go to expose the long-standing corruption in the region. All right, so this is the alleged method to the madness with regards to Russia's actions from Tim Cast. He quotes a Russian spokesperson.
Here we go. Max Sedon is the Moscow bureau chief for the Financial Times in Soviet Russia. News reports you, he says. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova on state television just now says, firstly, this is not the beginning of a war. This is very important. We are trying to prevent developments that could escalate into a global war. And secondly, this is the end of the war. Is that there was a legitimate Ukrainian government. Yanukovych was president. I was in Kiev in 2014 watching all this begin with the Euromaidan protests. Yanukovych was ousted, fled to Russia. You then get Zelensky, this president. He is viewed by Russia as a Western puppet. So as far as Russia's concerned, the US has already used manipulative, propagandistic tactics to take the country. That means NATO will move in. This is why Russia invades Crimea. The conflict has been ongoing. There has been war in the eastern region. Their view is, we're ending this now. It doesn't matter what Russia thinks. It doesn't matter what the mainstream media says. War is happening.
So it appears here Tim focuses on that time period in 2014 with Crimea. Okay, so I'm going to go to an explainer by Aaron Mate about how tensions had developed in Ukraine. In this recent clip a week before, Aaron reminds us of characters involved in the inflection point of the tension between Russia and Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Branko Maritrich, who is a writer for Jacobin, wrote a book about Joe Biden. So all these people, Victoria Nuland, Biden, Jake Sullivan, have a major role in this conflict, and this fear-mongering campaign they've made of a Russian invasion is also based on hype. Russia has been deploying forces to its Ukrainian border for a long time. And in fact, in my article, I have a graphic of years of fear-mongering headlines going back many years about Russian troop deployments on Ukraine's border. So really, actually, this troop buildup is not anything that new. We've seen it before. Administration is using this.
So here's Aaron's Substack, and he has a bunch of links. 2016, Russia is massing thousands of troops to Ukraine's border. 2013, what's Putin up to? The Russian military buildup in Europe. 2018, Ukraine asserts major Russian military buildup in Eastern Europe. 2019, almost 100,000 Russian troops poised. A year ago, after months of simmering conflict, thousands of Russian troops have amassed at the border of Ukraine. Okay, so we'll go through Aaron Mate's explainer. This is from episode 1427, Seat Warmer, No Agenda podcast with Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak, February 20th, 2022. There are no pictures here, but I may possibly spruce this up.
The Ukrainian president at the time, Yanukovych, he is going to sign this major agreement with the West. And it was one that the US and the EU were really pushing on him. And basically, it would have forced him to seriously curtail economic and cultural ties to Russia, which is Ukraine's neighbor. And it would bring Ukraine further into the Western orbit, which was a major goal of the U.S. regime change pro-war lobby at the time. The head of the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the regime change arm of the CIA, he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post at the time, calling Ukraine the biggest prize for the U.S. in its goal to basically undermine Russia. And he explained that if Ukraine can come into the U.S. orbit, then that will actually have an impact in Russia and possibly lead to Vladimir Putin's overthrow and make every neocon in Washington the happiest neocons in the world. So the U.S. pressures Yanukovych to sign this trade agreement, but there's a problem. Yanukovych realizes at the last minute that, oh shit, if I sign this, I'm going to have to cut pensions and I'm going to have to cut energy subsidies. And this will doom my re-election campaign. This is not going to fly. So he gets cold feet. And Russia sweeps in and sees an opportunity. And they offer him a more generous trade association deal, which he then says he is going to sign. And they also use some coercive measures too. But the point is he caves and says, I'm going to go with Russia. That then sets off these major protests against Yanukovych. And the U.S. gets firmly behind the protests. And there's a major part of those protests that are legitimate. They're anti-corruption, and Yanukovych was very corrupt. But the problem is there's also an element that is fascist and neo-Nazi. And they don't just want an end to corruption. They want regime change. And the U.S., as it often does, skillfully basically puts its weight behind the fascist elements. John McCain, Chris Murphy go over there, meet with a far-right leader, put their arms around him in Maidan. And all this culminates basically in a violent coup that forces Yanukovych to flee. And he does so only after there is an agreement brokered with the EU to hold new elections. And this coup undermines that. And the U.S. definitely is on the side of the far right, because we know that now from that leaked phone call that came out around then, that Victoria Nuland, who was then a top senior State Department official, she's now back working for Joe Biden, basically running his Ukraine policy again. There's a leaked phone call where she's speaking to the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine at the time, and they're picking the next Ukrainian prime minister. Nuland says Yats is the guy. And that's a reference to Yatsenyuk, who, lo and behold, a few weeks later became the prime minister. So the U.S. was heavily involved in this coup, and that sets off this 8-year conflict that we're still dealing with now, and that has led to this major geopolitical standoff. Russia responded to that coup by seizing Crimea because this new Ukrainian government was talking about joining NATO, and Russia was faced with the prospect of having NATO absorb its most important naval base in Crimea. So Putin took Crimea, which of course angered neocons in Washington, and you have the separatist war in the East break out. And for the separatist war, a major fighting force, and they've been integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces, is something called the Azov Battalion, which has its roots in Nazism and is a, if not a neo-Nazi militia now, I think they are, but even if you want to be generous, they're certainly neo-fascist, and that's who the U.S. is siding with inside of Ukraine.
All right, and that last part may explain why Putin specifically stated use of special military operations for demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. In today's AJ's show, he interviews a reporter on the ground in Ukraine and discusses some of the political divisions of the country. Indeed, there are political factions that are remnants of the Nazi Party. The on-the-ground reporter is Patrick Lancaster, who has a YouTube channel. Okay, so I'm about to play for you a leaked call with Victoria Nuland and U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt. Some regard this as smoking gun proof that the Barack Obama State Department selected the Prime Minister for Ukraine at this time with the goal of establishing a pro-nationalistic, pro-European Union regime which would stay separate from Russia. Victoria Nuland was considered the lead U.S. point person for what's been known as the Revolution of Dignity, and also establishing loan guarantees, remember the controversy with Biden, with the assistance of Secretary of State John Kerry at the time and Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. The U.S. aided in arming the fledgling new nation. This Substack, Why Are the Nazis in Ukraine, was written today by Michael Burgermeister. Okay, so to summarize this article, it starts off noting the history that the Ukraine was basically formed from World War I era Germany, where German collaborators captured about 50,000 prisoners of war and indoctrinated as many as they could into operating as an independent national group. An extreme right-wing political contingent continued to persist over the years. And before I go further, I will just try to delineate an observation I've made regarding the term right-wing, which is used in this article quite a bit. Here it's defined as individuals with a specific nationalist bias who focus on themselves as a specific group within a nation, and those who are of certain minorities, such as being of a different race or a minority religion or LGBTQ, they are considered separate and undesirable. In a way, I see it as the inverse of some of the far left activism we see today, where the minority group is the central authority and the majority white race is seen as undesirable, etc. With both sides, it's just a social discontent mass formation scenario where you have individuals who are unhappy. They find camaraderie and community under a specific political banner, and due to their unhappiness, they focus a lot of ire and angst against the other. So without reading you the whole article, essentially far-right factions existed and were inducted as a government functionary by operating as paramilitary organizations along with the government's military. The military-industrial complex through U.S. point person Victoria Nuland, among assorted other neocons and neolibs, began a spree of attacking and killing people through an event known as Revolution of Dignity. These killings were blamed on the then fourth president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. The far right within the nation was upset with Yanukovych because the then president would not sign the association with the European Union. So to restate things, there was a pro-European Union contingent of Ukrainians who were inducted by foreign state actors to cause mayhem and death and then blame it on the current presidential administration because that administration wanted to maintain a nationalistic designation separate from the European Union. And this separation was not compatible with the military-industrial complex modus operandi of having a European Union Ukraine armed to the teeth to allow the Western establishment's balance of power to be shifted further east to the Russian border. Looking at the map, these two regions, politically speaking, have always been more closely aligned with mainland Russia and were biased against both the European Union as well as the Ukraine government establishment. So when CIA Director John Brennan's special security units coordinated the attacks on the people of that region who opposed the coup, that further galvanized these regions to be more pro-Russia since 2014. So in essence, the United States sort of created this type of situation that we're seeing today. And with that overview, let's now listen to this clip with Victoria Nuland and Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now, so we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, what, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, you know, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, you know. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we can probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
okay.
Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.
Attaboy. Biden, attaboy. This whole call can be found on Irish Girl 27's page. Whether it's deets to stick, jelly up, one more wrinkle for you. Either they have a certain way of speaking that is a result of operating at a high up senior executive service level of functioning in government, sort of like we're in this special class, so we use these terms, or it's a specific jargon just to facilitate speed of communication. I don't know, which is something I observed there. Additional context to that video clip can be found in this Counterpunch article by Gary Loeb, Basic Notes on Victoria Nuland. I'll read to you from a key segment. In that year, while Nuland built support for the coup in Kiev, she boasted openly that the US had invested $5 billion in supporting the Ukrainian people's European aspirations. This referred to the support of some Ukrainians for the violent overthrow of democratically elected President Viktor Yanukovych on the basis of his alleged pro-Russian policies and his opposition to European Union affiliation under conditions that the EU is offering. To state the matter honestly, the US spent $5 billion to install a government in Kiev that would request NATO membership, ostensibly to protect it from always aggressive, always expanding Russia, and bind it forever to the US military-industrial complex in the free world. Since NATO membership, since the end of the Cold War, has invariably been followed by EU membership, it was easy for Nuland to pose as a champion of Ukraine's EU membership versus evil Russians opposing that membership. Yanukovych himself had negotiated seriously with the EU but rejected a plan for association due to its austerity provisions. Meanwhile, Moscow offered an attractive aid package. This, in the world of US propaganda, was a choice between Europe and Russia, with Yanukovych siding with America's adversary. The maiden coup occurred just a month after Nuland was recorded discussing the upcoming event with US Ambassador Pyatt. Nuland, who had joined Senator John McCain and other US politicians in offering cookies to the maiden protesters, discussed with Pyatt who should serve as prime minister after the coup. Pyatt noted that the EU favored Klitschko, the ex-boxer. Fuck the EU. So this is in reply to the specific favored candidate who, in that call, was not favored by Nuland. Nuland wanted a banker and NATO supporter, Yatsenyuk, to lead the new government. And of course, she soon got her way. Nuland worked with Tanianok of the neo-Nazi Sabda Party and the Right Sector Militia. Both glorify Stefan Bandera, the Ukrainian fascist leader who aided the Nazis in rounding up Ukrainian Jews during the war. Kenny Book publicly inveighs against the Moscow Jewish mafia ruling Ukraine. When Congressman Dana Rohrabacher Nuland, in a hearing soon after the coup, was asked whether there had been any neo-fascists on the Maidan, she refused to answer the question, stating there were mothers, grandmothers, and veterans, all colors of Ukraine. Color revolution, including ugly colors, on the Maidan. In other words, a diverse anti-Russian crowd. And then there's a paragraph that covers the mystery of Nuland's heritage and her marriage, and asking why would she support fascists who are basically against her own lineage. And this was a criticism of Israel at the time as well, who seemed to also support these radicals. This of course leads to a Pandora's box of the most suppressed information that you pretty much only find on BitChute. Well, I'll stop reading the article there, but that does give you additional context surrounding this whole situation. As far as I can tell, the establishment supporting intelligence community, the State Department, Republican and Democrat U.S. administrations, by and large support the European Union as well as NATO, and appear to be in favor of preemptive war, which we have seen in the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations, but interestingly not the Trump administration. There is great fear that it will happen again this administration. If there's additional info you would like to unpack, please let me know in the comments below. Peace.